The golden retriever and the stray raccoon became inseparable, until one day the raccoon vanished. The salty air of the Atlantic whipped through Eleanor Ainsworth's silver hair as she strolled along the rocky coast of Port Hope, Maine. It was a crisp autumn evening, the sky ablaze with the fiery hues of sunset. Beside her trotted Gus, her faithful golden retriever, his tail wagging rhythmically, his nose twitching with the myriad scents of the seaside. Port Hope was a small, picturesque town, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else, where life moved at a slower, more deliberate pace. Eleanor had lived there with her husband, Arthur, for over 50 years, raising their children, building a life filled with simple joys and enduring love. But Arthur had been gone for 5 years now, and the silence of their cozy seaside cottage often felt overwhelming. Gus was her constant companion, her furry shadow, a source of unwavering affection and comforting routine. He was more than just a pet. He was family. As they rounded a bend in the path, Gus suddenly stopped, his ears perked, his body tense. He let out a low growl, his gaze fixed on a thicket of bushes at the edge of the woods bordering Eleanor's backyard. "What is it, boy?" Eleanor asked, her voice calm but curious. Gus edged closer to the bushes, his growl deepening. Eleanor followed cautiously, her heart beating a little faster. She peered into the shadows, and then she saw it. A small, huddled form, barely visible amidst the tangled leaves. It was a raccoon, a young one, judging by its size. It was lying on its side, its breathing shallow and ragged. One of its hind legs was clearly injured, twisted at an unnatural angle. Eleanor's first instinct was to retreat. Raccoons were wild animals, known for their sharp claws and teeth, and their potential to carry diseases. But looking at the injured creature, so small and vulnerable, she couldn't bring herself to walk away. "Easy, Gus," she murmured, placing a restraining hand on the dog's collar. "Stay." Gus, despite his initial wariness, obeyed, his eyes fixed on the raccoon. Eleanor knelt down, cautiously extending a hand towards the injured animal. "It's okay, little one," she whispered. "I'm not going to hurt you." The raccoon flinched, but it didn't try to run. It simply looked at Eleanor with large, dark eyes filled with pain and fear. Eleanor knew she couldn't leave it there. It would surely die without help. She made a decision that would, in the coming weeks and months, profoundly change her life and the life of her beloved Gus. She carefully scooped up the injured raccoon, cradling it in her arms. It was surprisingly light, its fur soft and surprisingly clean. It let out a small whimper, but it didn't struggle. "We're going to take you home, little one," she said, her voice filled with a tenderness she hadn't felt in a long time. "We're going to get you help." Gus, sensing Eleanor's shift in attitude, seemed to relax slightly. He sniffed at the raccoon cautiously, then let out a soft whine, as if expressing his own concern. The walk back to the cottage was slow and careful. Eleanor held the raccoon close, trying to keep it warm and still. She had a feeling this was going to be a long night. This feeling is strangely familiar. The next few hours were a flurry of activity. Eleanor, drawing on her years of experience caring for farm animals and pets, set up a makeshift infirmary in a spare room. She lined a large cardboard box with soft blankets and towels, creating a cozy nest for the injured raccoon. She examined the injured leg as best she could, her touch gentle and reassuring. It was definitely broken, but hopefully it was a clean break. She cleaned the wound with warm water and antiseptic, her heart aching for the small creature's pain. Feeding the raccoon was a challenge. She tried offering it some milk from a dropper, but it refused. Then, remembering that raccoons were omnivores, she mashed up some ripe banana and offered it on a small spoon. This time, the raccoon tentatively licked at the fruit, then began to eat with increasing eagerness. Eleanor watched, a sense of relief washing over her. At least it was eating. That was a good sign. Throughout the night, Eleanor stayed by the raccoon's side, checking on it frequently, offering it water and small amounts of food. Gus, surprisingly, remained calm and curious. He would sit outside the box, watching the raccoon with a mixture of concern and fascination. By morning, the raccoon seemed a little stronger. It was still weak and in pain, but it was alert and responsive. Eleanor decided to name him Bandit because of the distinctive black mask across his eyes. The next step was to find a vet who was willing to treat a wild animal. Many vets, she knew, would be reluctant to take on the risk and liability. But she remembered George, her neighbor, a retired fisherman who had a soft spot for animals and a network of contacts throughout the town. George, a burly man with a weathered face and a kind heart, listened to Eleanor's story with a mixture of amusement and concern. A raccoon, Eleanor? You've always had a soft heart, haven't you? But he agreed to help. He made a few phone calls, and within an hour, he'd found a vet, Dr. Emily Carter, no relation to the vet from the tiger story. A young woman with a reputation for being compassionate and willing to go the extra mile. Dr. Carter examined Bandit carefully, confirming that the leg was broken but that it could be set. She administered pain medication and antibiotics, and then, with Eleanor's help, she carefully splinted the injured leg. "He's a lucky little guy," Dr. Carter said, smiling at Eleanor. "Most people wouldn't have bothered. You've got a good heart, Eleanor." Eleanor smiled back, her heart filled with gratitude. "He's a fighter," she said, "and so am I." The following weeks were a period of slow, gradual recovery. Bandit remained in his box, his movements restricted by the splint. Eleanor cared for him diligently, feeding him, cleaning his wound, and talking to him in soothing tones. Gus, surprisingly, became Bandit's constant companion. He would lie beside the box for hours, his head resting on the edge, watching the raccoon with a gentle, protective gaze. At first, Eleanor was worried about Gus getting too close, but Bandit seemed to welcome the dog's presence. He would reach out a tiny paw and touch Gus's nose, a gesture of tentative friendship. Slowly, cautiously, trust began to build between the three of them. Bandit, initially wary and fearful, began to relax in Eleanor's presence. He would take food from her hand, his small, black eyes watching her with increasing curiosity. He would even allow her to stroke his fur, a soft, rumbling purr emanating from his tiny chest. For Eleanor, caring for Bandit was a balm for her loneliness. It gave her a purpose, a focus, a reason to get up in the morning and face the day. The quiet cottage, once filled with the echoes of her past, now felt alive again, filled with the sounds of life, of healing, of an unlikely friendship blossoming in the most unexpected of places. She felt a new energy in her. As Bandit's leg healed and the splint was removed, he began to explore his surroundings. The spare room, once his entire world, became his playground. He climbed on furniture, investigated every nook and cranny, and, to Eleanor's amusement, discovered a particular fondness for playing with rolls of toilet paper, unraveling them with astonishing speed and dexterity. Gus, ever patient, followed Bandit's every move, his tail wagging gently. He seemed to have adopted the raccoon as his own personal project, a furry, mischievous sibling to be watched over and protected. The initial wariness between them had completely vanished, replaced by a playful, affectionate bond. They would chase each other around the room, wrestling and tumbling, their interactions a mix of canine exuberance and raccoon cunning. Bandit, though still a wild animal, adapted remarkably well to life with Eleanor and Gus. He learned to use a litter box, he responded to his name, and he even developed a fondness for cuddling on the sofa with Eleanor in the evenings. His small body nestled against her side, his soft fur a comforting warmth. Eleanor, however, was careful not to domesticate Bandit completely. She knew that he was still a wild creature, and she wanted to respect his natural instincts. She allowed him to spend time outdoors, in a specially built enclosure in the backyard, where he could climb trees, forage for food, and experience the sights and sounds of the natural world. The townspeople of Port Hope, initially skeptical of Eleanor's unusual pet, gradually came to accept Bandit as part of the landscape. They would often see him riding on Gus's back, the two of them a comical yet endearing sight, strolling through the town. George, Eleanor's neighbor, became a regular visitor, often bringing Bandit treats, scraps of fish from his daily catch, or ripe berries he'd gathered from the woods. He'd sit on the porch with Eleanor, watching Gus and Bandit play, a smile on his weathered face. "You've done a good thing, Eleanor," he'd say. "Given that little fella a second chance." Eleanor would smile back, her heart filled with gratitude. She knew she'd been lucky. Bandit could have been a difficult, even dangerous animal. But he wasn't. He was gentle, playful, and affectionate, a testament to the power of kindness and the surprising ways in which animals could connect across species boundaries. But even amidst the joy and the companionship, Eleanor couldn't shake a lingering sense of unease. Bandit was growing bigger, stronger, and his wild instincts, though tempered by his bond with her and Gus, were still very much present. She knew that this idyllic situation couldn't last forever. She knew that one day nature might call him back to the wild. She knew that there are many unknown challenges awaiting them. The months that followed were a period of peaceful routine, a testament to the unlikely harmony that had been established between Eleanor, Gus, and Bandit. Their days fell into a comfortable rhythm, a blend of domesticity and wildness that was both unique and deeply fulfilling. Mornings began with Gus nudging Eleanor awake, his tail wagging expectantly. Bandit, usually curled up asleep on a cushion at the foot of the bed, would stretch and yawn, his pink tongue peeking out from behind his sharp teeth. Breakfast was a shared affair, with Gus devouring his kibble and Bandit enjoying a mix of fruits, vegetables, nuts, and the occasional piece of cooked chicken or fish. Eleanor made sure to provide Bandit with a diet that mimicked what he would eat in the wild, supplementing it with vitamins and minerals to ensure his continued health. After breakfast, Gus and Bandit would spend the morning playing in the backyard, their antics a constant source of amusement for Eleanor. They would chase each other through the grass, wrestle playfully, and engage in games of hide and seek amongst the trees and shrubs. Bandit, with his nimble paws and sharp claws, was a natural climber, often scaling the tallest trees with ease, while Gus would watch from below, barking encouragement. In the afternoons, Eleanor would often take Gus and Bandit for walks along the coast, or into the nearby woods. Bandit, though he had free run of the backyard, seemed to enjoy these excursions, exploring new scents and sights with a boundless curiosity. He would often scamper ahead, disappearing into the undergrowth, only to reappear a few minutes later, his black eyes shining with excitement. Evenings were a time for quiet companionship. Eleanor would read or knit, while Gus and Bandit would curl up together on the sofa, their bodies intertwined, their soft snores filling the room. It was a scene of domestic tranquility, a testament to the unlikely bond that had formed between them. But even within this peaceful routine, Eleanor was always mindful of Bandit's wild nature. She never forgot that he was a raccoon, not a pet. She allowed him to retain his independence, to forage for food, to climb trees, to explore the world beyond the confines of their home. She also noticed subtle changes in Bandit's behavior as he matured. He became more independent, spending more time exploring on his own. He was still affectionate with her and Gus, but he was also more restless, more driven by his instincts. The spring mating season brought a noticeable shift. Bandit became more vocal, emitting a series of chittering calls, particularly at night. He would pace the perimeter of the yard, his nose twitching, as if searching for something or someone. Eleanor knew that this was a natural part of his development, a sign that he was responding to the call of the wild. She felt a pang of sadness, knowing that this might be the beginning of the end of their time together. But she also knew that she couldn't hold him back, that she had to respect his natural instincts. "She is very worried." The morning Bandit disappeared dawned like any other. Eleanor woke to Gus's gentle nudging, the sun streaming through her bedroom window. She got up, made coffee, and prepared breakfast for herself and her two companions. But when she went to let Bandit out of his enclosure, he wasn't there. At first, she wasn't overly concerned. Bandit often slept in odd places, curled up in a hidden corner of the yard, or nestled high in the branches of a tree. "Bandit?" she called, her voice calm but questioning. "Come on, boy. Breakfast time." Gus, sensing her concern, began to whine, his tail tucked between his legs. He sniffed around the enclosure, his nose to the ground, searching for Bandit's scent. Eleanor checked all of Bandit's usual hiding places, calling his name, her voice growing increasingly anxious. But there was no sign of him. She searched the entire yard, peering under bushes, behind trees, inside the shed. She checked the fences, looking for any sign of a break, any indication of how he might have escaped. But there was nothing. A knot of fear began to tighten in her stomach. This wasn't like Bandit. He'd never disappeared like this before. He'd always come when she called, especially for food. Gus, sensing her distress, stayed close to her side, whimpering softly, his eyes filled with a worried expression. Eleanor called George, her voice trembling. "George, Bandit's gone. I can't find him anywhere." George arrived within minutes, his face etched with concern. Together, they searched the yard again, expanding their search to the surrounding woods, calling Bandit's name, their voices echoing through the trees. The hours that followed were a blur of frantic searching and mounting despair. Eleanor and George walked for miles, calling Bandit's name until their voices were hoarse. They alerted the neighbors, asking them to keep an eye out for the missing raccoon. Gus, exhausted but determined, continued to sniff the ground, his nose twitching, desperately trying to pick up Bandit's scent. But the trail, it seemed, had gone cold. As darkness fell, Eleanor returned to her cottage, her heart heavy with grief and worry. The silence of the house was overwhelming, broken only by Gus's mournful whines. The empty food bowls, the untouched toys, were constant reminders of Bandit's absence. Eleanor sat on the sofa, staring out at the darkened yard, her mind racing. Where could he have gone? Had he been injured? Had he been taken by someone? Or had he simply followed his instincts, returning to the wild from which he came? The uncertainty was the worst part. Not knowing what had happened to Bandit, not knowing if he was safe, was a torment. She thought back to the day she had found him, injured and vulnerable, a tiny creature in need of help. She had given him a second chance, a home, a family. And he, in return, had brought joy and companionship into her life, filling the void left by Arthur's death. Now he was gone, and the emptiness she felt was almost unbearable. She felt so empty, like the day she lost Arthur. Gus, sensing her distress, nudged his head against her hand, his eyes filled with a sadness that mirrored her own. Eleanor wrapped her arms around the dog, burying her face in his soft fur, drawing comfort from his unwavering presence. "Oh, Gus," she whispered, her voice choked with tears. "What are we going to do?" Gus whimpered softly, as if trying to reassure her, but Eleanor knew that he was as lost and heartbroken as she was. They had lost a member of their family, an unlikely, but deeply loved, companion. And the silence of the cottage was once again a deafening reminder of their loss. The days that followed were filled with a mixture of desperate hope and growing despair. Eleanor and George continued their search, expanding their radius, exploring every possible hiding place. They put up posters with Bandit's picture, offering a reward for his safe return. They contacted local animal control, the police, and every veterinarian's office within a 50-mile radius. They posted notices on social media, hoping that someone, somewhere, might have seen him. The townspeople of Port Hope rallied around Eleanor, offering their support and assistance. Some helped with the search, others brought food and comfort, sharing stories of their own encounters with Bandit and Gus. The outpouring of kindness was heartwarming, but it couldn't fill the void left by Bandit's absence. Gus, too, continued to search, his nose constantly to the ground, his ears perked, listening for any sign of his friend. He would often return to Bandit's enclosure, sniffing around, whining softly, as if hoping to find him there. Eleanor contacted Dr. Sarah Miller, the wildlife biologist, a different character from the vet in the previous story, but sharing the same name for narrative consistency, hoping for some insight into Bandit's disappearance. Dr. Miller listened to Eleanor's story with empathy and understanding. She explained that raccoons, especially males, often roam widely during mating season, searching for mates. She also cautioned that Bandit, despite his time with Eleanor and Gus, was still a wild animal, with instincts that might lead him into dangerous situations. "I'm so sorry, Eleanor," she said gently. "I know how much you care about him, but it's possible that he's simply returned to the wild. That's where he belongs ultimately." Eleanor knew Dr. Miller was right, but the knowledge offered little comfort. She couldn't shake the feeling that something bad had happened to Bandit, that he was in trouble, that he needed her help. As the weeks passed, the hope of finding Bandit alive began to dwindle. The posters faded in the sun and rain, the phone calls stopped, and the search parties grew smaller. Eleanor, however, refused to give up completely. She continued to walk the woods, calling Bandit's name, leaving out small amounts of food in his favorite spots, just in case. The search, and the constant worry, began to take a toll on Eleanor's health. She lost weight, she couldn't sleep, and the joy seemed to have gone out of her life. The memories of Arthur came back in full force. George, concerned for her well-being, tried to persuade her to accept the reality of the situation, to move on, to find a way to heal. "He's gone, Eleanor," he said gently one evening, as they sat on her porch watching the sunset. "He's probably back in the wild, living his life. You gave him a good home, a good life, for as long as you could. You can't blame yourself." Eleanor knew he was right, but the words didn't penetrate the wall of grief that surrounded her heart. She couldn't let go of the hope, however faint, that Bandit might still be out there, somewhere. She is praying for a miracle. It was a cool, crisp morning, several weeks after Bandit's disappearance, when Eleanor finally found a measure of peace. She was walking with Gus along the beach, the waves crashing against the shore, the salty air filling her lungs. Gus, as usual, was sniffing the ground, his tail wagging slowly. Suddenly, he stopped, his ears perked, and he let out a soft bark. He was looking towards a patch of dune grass, his body tense, his gaze fixed. Eleanor's heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Could Bandit have somehow found his way back? She approached cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. But as she got closer, she realized it wasn't Bandit. It was a female raccoon with 3 tiny kits clinging to her back. The kits were young, their eyes barely open, their fur soft and downy. The mother raccoon looked at Eleanor with a mixture of caution and curiosity, but she didn't run. She seemed to sense that Eleanor and Gus posed no threat. Eleanor knelt down, watching the raccoon family with a sense of wonder and bittersweet sadness. She realized, in that moment, that Bandit was gone. He had likely found a mate, started a family, and returned to the wild life he was meant to live. A wave of acceptance washed over her, a sense of peace she hadn't felt since Bandit's disappearance. She knew that she had done everything she could for him, that she had given him a loving home, a second chance at life. And now he was living that life, fulfilling his natural destiny. She stood up, smiling softly. "Goodbye, Bandit," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the sound of the waves. "Be well." Gus, sensing her shift in mood, nudged his head against her hand, letting out a soft whine, as if offering his own farewell. From that day forward, Eleanor continued to walk the beach, to explore the woods, to enjoy the beauty of the natural world around her. But she no longer searched for Bandit. She knew he was gone, and she had finally accepted it. She decided to honor Bandit's memory by creating a small wildlife sanctuary in her backyard. She planted native trees and shrubs, providing food and shelter for birds, squirrels, and other creatures. She even built a small pond, hoping to attract frogs and other amphibians. George helped her with the project, his gruff exterior softening as he saw the joy it brought Eleanor. He even built a small wooden sign, which read, "Bandit's Haven, a place for wild things." The sanctuary became a place of peace and healing for Eleanor, a reminder of the unlikely friendship she had shared with a wild raccoon, a testament to the enduring power of love and connection, even across species boundaries. Gus, too, seemed to find solace in the sanctuary. He would often lie in the shade of the trees, his eyes watching the birds and squirrels, as if remembering his playful companion. Life at the cottage returned to a new normal, a normal without Bandit, but a normal filled with love, with memories, and with a renewed appreciation for the beauty and the fragility of life. Eleanor had learned a valuable lesson, a lesson about the importance of letting go, of accepting the natural cycles of life, and of cherishing the moments, however fleeting, that we share with the creatures who touch our hearts. And she is ready to open her heart for the next creature that needs help.